in the chat, answer this question for us. What is the hardest part about marketing your business online? I'd love to hear kind of what your struggle is. What is the biggest thing that's keeping you from the success you would hope to have? Put those into the chat. Now, one of the things that I learned years ago as a business owner is that I need to set very clear goals. And this is very true. A goal without a plan is just a wish. It's like, gosh, for many years, I wish I could get to this number, right? I wish I could hit this revenue number, but I never had a goal written down. I never had any kind of plan in place to get to those goals. So, a lot of us might feel like we're kind of lost at sea. We're not sure what we're doing. If you're just wishing that next year is better, you don't have a plan. It's better if you had wind in your sails, right? This is our little metaphor here. Clear goals is wind in your sails. If you've got some sort of goals in place, it's really going to help you hit that number, or at least do the work to get to that goal, right? At the end of the day. There was a Harvard study that was done, and this is pretty interesting. They interviewed one of the graduating classes from Harvard, which is obviously a lot of smart people, right? 84% of the graduating class had no specific goals. So they had wishes, right? 13% had goals, but didn't write them down. And 3% had clear written goals and plans to accomplish them, right? So they wrote down the goal and then they saw the path to get to that goal. When they went back and reviewed this, these people, 13% who had the goals not written down, just 13% that had goals in mind, were making twice as much as 84% of the people that had no goals at all. But even more dramatically, the 3% that had the clear written goals written down were making on average 10 times as much as all the other in the graduating class together. It's very, very important. And having those written down where you can see them and you can then act on them is hugely important. So you need to have written goals. You need to have some sort of a plan in place to hit those goals. You also need to set at a minimum a 1-year goal. So you could do a 90-day goal, maybe a 1-year goal, and maybe even a 3-year goal. But at a minimum, I would highly recommend a 1-year goal. This is the time of year to be thinking about that, we're coming into a new year. Let's get a goal. By the end of the year, we need to have, this number of installs complete, or this number of revenue, whatever that is. You definitely need to have those. We do, of course, recommend things like quarterly goals and maybe even monthly goals. My company does quarterly goals through the EOS system. And we have quarterly rocks that we do. And if we can hit those get those things done at the end of the quarter, then we're on our way to our 1 and our 3-year goal. The real trick here is you have to have a stopping point for each of these tasks or each of these goals. And like I said, typically that's a 1 year. So you have to have some point where there's a goal that you want to achieve, but you need to set an expiration date on that, or I want to achieve it by this particular time. That's the big piece to this, that there needs to be some sort of a deadline in place as well. Now you can adjust it as time goes on, right? As your revenue goes up, maybe you're doing a little more business than you thought you would, and you need to adjust that goal. That's great. Same thing for if it's going the other direction, maybe change it, maybe just figure out what other efforts you can do to still hit that goal. But it's not written in stone. It is written down, but it's not written in stone. If you need to adjust as time goes on, that's cool. So let's set some goals for 2025. For the most part, when we talk to window treatment and awning business owners, they have some sort of revenue related target. We want to hit 1.2 million, or we want to hit whatever number in the coming year. So the easiest thing to do there, and we're gonna work through some of this. Obviously, divide that by 12. So you figure out, okay, what do we need to hit each month? Couple other things you'll need to know: your average transaction value. In the window treatment industry, that's probably in the $4,000 range now. On the awning side, it's probably closer like 6,500, 7,500, somewhere in that area. How many leads do you need in order to close that business? And then, of course, how many calls will that require? Because leads, or everybody that calls you is not immediately a lead, right? So before we do that, let's look at 2024. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's look at what we did this year. And if you're in your workbook, you should have access to a worksheet like this. So on average, how many installs did you do this year? Figure out how many installs you did, divide that by 12. That'll give you a pretty good idea of your monthly install rate. Another thing that you can look at is your average cost per lead. So all of the marketing efforts, the marketing dollars that you spent, how many installs you did. So with the money you spent this year, divide that by how many installs you did, and you'll have that average cost per lead. Conversion rate. So conversion rate is how good are you at sales? If you get 10 people to raise their hand, are you able to close 7 of them? So a 70% close rate. Are you able to close 3 of them, 3 out of 10? Whatever that number is, change that into a percentage so you have a good idea of a conversion rate for your leads. The trick here with this one is everybody pretty much thinks they're really good at sales. And maybe you are, but you typically say your conversion rate is typically higher in your mind than what it really is when you get down to the paper. Part of that is because you get calls from people that abandon the project or they go somewhere else, right? There's other things that happen. You're not really closing as high of a rate as you thought. But definitely be honest with yourself here. What is that conversion rate? If you do it on paper, you should have a pretty good idea of what that number is. And then, as I mentioned earlier, what is your average job for your particular industry, whether that's window treatments or awnings? Now, on the worksheet, you can plug these numbers in. So you'll see an example here. We wanted in this year, in this example, 10 installs per month, which is 120 installs a year. Our average customer value is $37.50. That means at the end of the year, we should have made around $450K in revenue with these numbers. So obviously then the idea here is to plug in your 2025 numbers with your goals in mind. How many installs do you want to do per month? So if we did 10 a month this year, we'd love to get to 17, right? That puts us at 204 installs a year. Average customer value is probably not going to go down, quite honestly. That number is probably going to go up a little bit, or at least stay the same. But you should have a pretty good idea of what your average customer overall is worth. And if you're doing high-end jobs or you're doing a lot of new construction, these numbers may be quite a bit higher where you don't need as many leads to hit revenue goals. But plug that number in there, average customer value. That'll give you a good idea of the additional revenue that you're going to add this year. You compare the two numbers and see the difference between the two. And in this example, we're going to go from 450 to 612. That's a nice growth number there. Now go over to the second tab in this in the worksheet, and you'll start to see on here some of the different things, including how much money you need to put into marketing in order to hit that goals. What is it? 17 installs per month is where we want to be. So we need to have an annual budget of around 25 grand. We've also got some other things like labor, technology. So all in, we need to invest around 43 grand in our example in order to hit that 612K number, I think is what that was. So as a percentage, that's around 9.7% of the business of revenue coming in that needs to go towards marketing in order to keep the machine running. And then you'll see down here, obviously, new added revenue. your ROI, some other really cool stuff on the worksheet as well. So let's set a goal. What is your goal for the coming year? This has been a strange year for some businesses, right? And next year is looking like it's going to be a lot better. I'm hearing a lot of positive things about the coming year. So that's great news. So I would definitely aim a little higher than whatever you're going to hit this year. And I think you can probably get there if you're fairly conservative. I wouldn't be crazy. The other thing about being too crazy is it's a great goal to have this really lofty goal, but if you don't hit it and you're not on target for it, you kind of start getting a little discouraged. So make sure that your goal is in line with a decent growth rate.